I'm from Portland, Oregon, so I actually really appreciated the great beer. It was a lot of fun. We all set? Okay, I don't have to be that close to the mic. All right. Okay, great. Yeah. So yeah, a lot of fun. So I'm gonna be. This is a presentation actually I did at DEF CON. There's some slight modifications to it. Just to give you guys a background, my name is Ken Westin. I'm from Portland, Oregon. It's a lot like Grand Rapids actually, except weed isn't legal here, so my presentation may not be as entertaining as I think it is. I actually developed a number of theft recovery tools. I actually was able to actually utilize these tools and work very closely with law enforcement. And I learned a lot along the way. It actually allowed me to do hacking legally, right? So developing basically Trojans that are friendly, tracking criminals people who steal laptops. It actually led to seeing a lot in the underground and sort of how criminals work, how stolen property gets fenced. Ended up recovering a lot of stolen property, unveiled a lot of other crimes too, even recovered stolen vehicles, helps solve crimes like carjackings and things like that as well. And I'm going to walk through some of the technologies and the tools that I actually use for that. So I have assisted law enforcement as well in a number of investigations, helping them, and not just in theft recovery, but also utilizing some of the data mining tools for helping to track online predators. And I'll talk a little bit about that, particularly with mining image data, Exif image data. So I have put a lot of people in jail with data, which is sort of unique, right? So it's crazy to think that one piece of data can actually be used for putting people in jail and solving crimes. I'm currently a security specialist. I can't say where I work, but it's a machine data company. I'll leave it at that. So when I actually presented at DEF CON, if you ever want to become a target for doxing, present at DEF CON. It's awesome. The press called me a professional cyber stalker. I got called the real life Mr. Robot. That was awesome. And then an Oregon business actually did a profile on me on the Good Hacker. So talked a lot about how I'm able to leverage these technologies for good, right? So this is what I like call my wall of shame. So these are actually photos from actual people that I've put in jail. You'll notice a lot of them are webcam photos. So basically, the technology I built would actually utilize the web camera to capture photos of the person. I also helped recover stolen phones, USB devices, iPods, a number of other devices. So I'll talk about some of those cases specifically as we go through the presentation. I want to talk a little bit about my theory, though. I'm kind of a liberal arts nerd. So anyone know who this is? This is Edmond Lacard. So there's this thing called Lacard's exchange principle. So Edmond Lacard was a forensic investigator. He was sort of one of the first forensic scientists, really. He actually founded forensic science. He's from France. And he had this thing called Edmond Lacard's exchange principle that every contact leaves a trace. Of course, he was dealing with physical crimes, but the idea is that whenever a crime is committed, they always leave something behind or they take something with them. There's always something that occurs in that case. There's always a trace. This is before fingerprints. This is before DNA. So he sort of really thought ahead. And I believe this applies to the digital world as well. It's all only a matter of where you look for the data, how you collect that information. When there is a crime committed, be it a breach, there's always going to be a trace in the logs. There's got to be a way to find it. So that's kind of my theory. And one thing I found too is that there's all these pieces of data that are out there, and really when you're able to take all these sort of individual pieces of data like a social security number, device IDs, IP address, a phone number, geolocation, usernames, that's one thing. But when we actually start to able to connect that, we can actually develop a profile of an individual. And this data comes from a lot of different sources, and even more so with IoT. We're able to grab a lot of data from Fitbit devices. And so there's a lot of information out there, and a lot of times people think that, this can't identify me in this log or this website that I go to. That's not necessarily the case. When you start to draw those correlations, or new technology would allow you to draw those correlations, some really interesting things are going to happen. And I talk about interaction of things. So when I look at data, there's data that's actually created by us, right? So these are things that we're conscious of when we're interacting with our devices. We're actually we're able to we tweet, we put emails out there, we have calendars. These are things we're aware of and that we're putting out there. But as a result of that, when we were actually interacting with the devices, there's actually data created for us as well. So analytics, or when a web page gets created, right? So we have data that's from our boarding passes, a lot of information like that. But there's also, in this process, there's data that's actually created about us as well, that a lot of times we're not aware of. And that information gets aggregated, it gets shared. And when you're able to mine that information, you can draw some interesting connections. And then there's what I like to call Boogie Data. So Boogie Data is information that's gathered in logs. It's out there that a lot of times people think, hey, this is totally not going to identify me at all. For example, when someone sends an SMS message, right? If I delete that and the other person deletes it, there's no record, right? Wrong. There's over 20 log files that get generated throughout the wireless carrier with that information, right? So there's a lot of cases like that where a lot of this data is just sitting in there, it's sort of dormant, and a lot of it gets archived. We're talking like terabytes of data in some of these companies. It's just massive amounts of data about us that at some point, when that information does get mined, it's going to unveil some really interesting things about us and our activities. So kind of get started too is not a lot of fans of some of my work. I'll kind of leave it at that. This is from when I actually tried to do a talk at Black Hat. I think you should reflect on the ethical implications of the technology you're happily distributing. And you'll kind of see through this presentation that my goal is to actually educate and do good. I've never had any sort of malicious intent. My goal has always been to utilize the technology to track criminals, but also to educate other people about how these same tools and techniques can be used to track you by criminals themselves. I got started with this. I was really interested in USB malware. I actually started a website called USB Hacks. And there's a number of exploit tools, and a lot of people actually asked for some of these tools, so I actually put them up on this website. Be very careful when you download those. Don't run them on your system, please. But there are a lot of. I was just really interested in how people were able to compromise networks because I'm lazy. I don't want to go and try to hack an external network when I can just get someone to insert a flash drive, or if I can get inside of a company and insert a flash drive, I can steal data. It's a lot easier that way to actually infiltrate a network. And so that's kind of how I got started with all of this stuff. And then I was working on my master's degree, and I figured out I want to find a way to utilize this technology for good. So what I did was I took a lot of the concepts that were being developed for USB malware, and I turned it into a happy Trojan. Thanks, Bob. So the idea here is that you take something that's you install on your device yourself, and if it gets plugged into a computer, it'll Trojanize that device and it'll send information out. So the idea here is it was for theft recovery purposes. So if you steal my flash drive or another USB removable media device, you plug it into your computer, I'm going to get your username. I'm going to get a lot of other information about it that I can maybe use to recover that device. And it was sort of a theory that I had, and I put it out there for free as a tool. And it ended up getting on, back then it was Dig. My website got dug to death. And from there, I got a little bit of funding to kind of build this out and build a pro version. And I found that there were a number of other devices that this worked with. It wasn't just flash drives. It also worked with the original iPods back then. It also worked with GPS devices, external hard drives, and cameras. And so I put up the actual code for this Windows USB client. So if you guys want to download it and take a look at it, that's the actual original source code for it. It's not very complex. It doesn't need to be. I took advantage of basic auto run capability, which is basically a vulnerability. I think they patched it finally like a year ago, but it would also leverage other things too. So not just an auto run, but you can also disguise some of the files to look like something that someone wants to click on, like a passwords.exe or an MP3 file, something like that. So one thing I found is that we were able to collect IP address and things like that, and working with law enforcement actually recovering stolen devices. There was a lot of issues with this because getting IP address doesn't necessarily mean an attribution. You guys probably run into this a lot of cases when there are data breaches. An IP address, it's helpful, but it's not going to be the smoking gun. It does require a lot of work by law enforcement, and I found that a lot of times law enforcement, they don't like to work. So I know you guys are shocked. And also, it's not identity, so it doesn't put a person in front of the computer. That's the key, is like it doesn't actually identify the person that was in front of that computer at that time. We'll talk more about that later. But probable cause, it's increasingly challenged for that as well. It's not always accurate through proxies, and then it takes a long time, and then IPv6. Oh, fuck. So this is the first iPod recovery where we actually got a connection through. I know it's kind of small. I apologize. I could have blown that up a bit. But, we got information on this one where we got the ISP. But the most important thing we got was the username. And it was this Galapagos family, right? And we got this connection. They were able to take this, and there was only one kid that had that name in the school. So, you got busted. So what's interesting is that it's not necessarily IP address, but getting other information like username, trying to mine the systems for any sort of identifiers for an individual, any clue that you can get. That's what we were gathering. I put this out there. I got a lot of press from it, and I actually got approached by a company. They make thermal imaging cameras. They're very high-end cameras. These devices cost anywhere from $3,000 to $300,000 a piece. And not only for theft recovery, but a lot of these devices too, they're not allowed to be sold in certain countries, and they were having issues with this, where some of these devices were ending up in Iran and other countries, and they were trying to figure out, who was selling these to them. So I worked with them and actually developed, got to go a little deeper, where we developed the agent, but we also embedded it into the firmware. So we were able to then identify specifically where this was coming from. We also had a number of IDs that were embedded in that as well. So when they would open it on the like a SD card, like if you wiped it and you put a new one in, the camera saw that and it would actually reinstall the agent on the next one. So we were able to kind of have a little bit of a persistence with it. And then we also had an ID for the distributor. So we were able to identify specifically who was selling it to these particular countries. So it was kind of one of my first kind of big deals in my startup. I actually was able to actually quit my job, my day job, and do this full time, which was a lot of fun actually. And this is actually what I would do too, is that we disguise the agent as a thermal image itself, and this is the actual image I used of a cat, of course. And actually, when I was working on these presentations, I went back to some of my code because people were asking about Macs. They're totally secure. You can't do the same thing on those. Well, you can. It's not going to be like auto-run capability and things like that, but there are some really interesting things I found. And when I was going back, I looked at some of the old code I had, and I would use AppleScript. And why would I use AppleScript? It's trusted. It's also interfaces with most of the OS X applications. It's basically PowerShell for OS X. You have access to a lot of information, a lot of interfaces with other applications. I'm also incredibly lazy and a very shitty programmer, so AppleScript works really well for me. I'm not going to do anything in Objective-C. Sorry. But one thing I discovered was that if you put a .mp3 on a OS X, one of these scripts, then OS X has a security thing in there where it'll actually throw a .app on it so people know it's an application. But that's very easy to circumvent, and I can go ahead and talk about this because I sent this over to Apple and they said it wasn't a vulnerability, so we're totally safe. So here's the idea: is that Justin Bieber.mp3.app. So I use this character. It's called an oganek. It's a Turkish character. It looks like a period. And if I throw that on it and I put .mp3, it doesn't throw the .app on it. So I also disguise the icon, make it look like it's an MP3. So it's pretty simple. And if we have time at the end of this, I'll actually run the Trojan on my system, and I'll show you how it works. And I have some of the script available too. So you can actually modify in the package. You can actually modify the icon that's showing it here. And here's just a little sample of the script. It's not very complex. But there's this object called sysinfo where you can gather information about the system. And then what I would use is, I used iTunes to exfiltrate data from the device. Instead of trying to use a browser or something like that, that's going to raise suspicion. So what I did was I gathered all the data and then I sent it out through a query string through iTunes out to a remote server. So I get some information like the name of the user and other information. There's also objects where you can actually grab what applications are currently running, and you can actually grab some data from those as well. And if you actually see on the bottom of this is actually, you can actually run shell scripts as well from AppleScript, which is pretty cool. There was actually an exploit for OS X about a year or two ago, and that's why I show an example here. So if you run this on your Mac, make sure you've updated your system in the last 2 years. Yeah, please. And the code is actually available here. Sorry, it's github.com/kwestin/AppleRaiser. So if you can go there, you can see the full Apple script. It's available there if you want to play with it. Just be careful. But it's really neat too is that I would pass that data through iTunes, and then what I can do too is, so you can't see what I got passed in the query string, I would then also immediately stream an MP3 from that server. So when you run it looks like you clicked on an MP3, and it's going to start sending data, and then it's also going to load up an MP3 from a remote server, so you don't know that I'm actually running code in the background. So you think that the whole thing with USB flash drives, we'd be done with this? No. We've seen this as an attack vector with Stuxnet, USB malware too. We've seen it in the International Space Station. In 2012, we even seen like with Stuxnet and a lot of ICS plants, they're still vulnerable to these as well. I'm surprised when I go into some customer sites and on the industrial side, and they're still running Windows XP. Because these systems, they can't update them fast enough, right? So some of these USB attack vectors are still, it's still a threat, particularly in healthcare and then industrial. And also in Black Hat 2015, people were still spreading out flash drives, and people were still taking them and plugging them into their computers, and their data was still getting stolen. And we also have other new, more advanced threats like USB killer. So kind of moving on, it's one thing to have some like IP address, things like that, but it's better to actually start connecting some of those dots. Sometimes people call these the crazy walls. You guys have probably seen it like in CSI where they start drawing connections. So the connections, it's really important when you're doing an investigation. So one of the first flash drives I recovered, it was actually stolen from a professor. I'll get some water here. It was stolen from a professor, and he had the agent installed on the device, and so I helped him with the recovery. The first connections we got just mapped to an ISP. It didn't really tell us a lot of information. There's not a whole lot we could do there. It's very difficult, again, to get like a subpoena to get the information, and by then, obviously the person's probably moved on. But with the second and third connections we got, it was actually in a university. So we actually mapped it out to the University of North Texas. So we had some internal IP address. We also had the external. We knew where it was. We contacted the university. We worked with them on it. And we discovered that we also had our timestamp. And that's really important. Time is very important when you're dealing with forensics and logs. So we grabbed the timestamp. We also found, after talking to the university, that they required key badges. And they were also logging that data as well. So we were able to identify who was actually in that computer lab at this given time. And they also had cameras, and a lot of times people don't realize that a lot of logs are actually generated from these as well. So you can actually map out specifically, within a time window of who was actually in that room. And from this, we were actually able to get the flash drive back. We identified that it was a student that had taken it, and we got it back for them. So he had his dissertation on there. It was more the data that was on that was more valuable to him. So after the USB stuff, I moved into laptops. I was kind of curious, how can we better protect laptops? There are a number of theft recovery tools out there, and a lot of them seemed rather invasive. A lot of them actually had backdoors into the system that the companies would have access to. I looked at the laptops, and they all had web cameras, and there's a lot of data that we can actually grab from these systems. I also looked at, this is back when the first iPhone was created, and they were using Wi-Fi for geolocation. I go, what if we could do that for a Mac for a stolen computer? So it was actually the first to actually deploy a tool to actually track location using Wi-Fi networks and using the web camera to capture a photo of the suspect. So, for example, if it was stolen, we would identify, the user would log in, they would activate tracking. At that time, I used Flickr because I didn't want to have to create my own infrastructure and have to secure it, because I'm lazy. But it worked out really well. Just utilize the Flickr API. It goes to the Flickr account, and then they were able to get photos of the person. We also had the location information. It was accurate within 10 to 20 meters. So geolocation, we were using Skyhook Wireless. Now it's pretty much embedded in every operating system, so it's actually available through just common APIs. You can also access through the Google Maps API. So here's the link that you can actually pass information through, and you can get location. So it's a lot easier now than when I was doing it. You kids and your technology. It's a lot easier for you guys. So the first recovery I had was actually, it was back in New York. It was an iMac that was stolen, and we activated the tracking, and we got these photos. Dealing with law enforcement was really frustrating. The police officer I was dealing with didn't understand technology. He had dealt with some of the older approaches to theft recovery, and he goes, I have to fill out a bunch of paperwork, I got to get a subpoena, I have to do all this stuff. I'm like, no, dude, print out a photo, all right? We have the location within 10 to 20 meters. Print out the photo and ask around, like, if anyone's seen this guy. And he's like, yeah, don't tell me how to do my job, all right? And then, sure enough, that's what he did. And turns out it was this guy that had a tattoo parlor. This is in the back of his office. And you'll notice there's a lot of other really cool gear that's back there. This huge big screen TV. There's a bunch of music equipment and things like that. He's almost like a producer in his little office. They went in, they recovered not only the customer's iMac, but also 3 laptops that were from different cases as well. So that's where I started to see that a lot of times when these devices are getting recovered, that's how I can get law enforcement interested, because 80% of the time they're going to find other crimes that have been committed, other stolen property and things like that. And now that cop, you want to be good friends. Next time I'm in New York, he wanted me to go there, and we're going to go to a baseball game together. That's cool. So we had another situation in Portland, Oregon, where I live, where a bunch of schools were getting robbed repeatedly of laptops. And so I actually worked with them. I said, hey, I'll help you guys out, because they kept coming back. They would get new laptops and they would get stolen again. Right? And so I said, hey, I'm going to install software on some of these bait laptops. Let's leave them out and see what happens. Sure enough, a week later, they got stolen, and we were able to track them to Vancouver, which is just north of Portland, Oregon. We were able to get information. We got photos of this guy. We tracked it to a specific location. This was a challenge because, again, police, they went to this location, but it was a duplex. And I even told them, I go, it's within 10 meters of accuracy. It's not going to tell you, GPS exactly. And so he goes to one side, and the cop actually knew the guy that was there. It's the guy that does his roof. And he's like, he started telling me the technology doesn't work. You know what the hell you're doing, whatever. You're wasting our time. So I drove out there, and I had my laptop, and I was sniffing the Wi-Fi networks that were out there. And there was a Russian, that was the name of the Wi-Fi network. And on this guy's car, it was actually next to that house that he went to, there was this big Russian Pride bumper sticker, right? And I'm sitting there with my Wi-Fi, and okay, this is totally right. We got the location, and out walks someone from the house. It's the guy that we have a photo of, right? And he starts looking at me, and I just look at my computer real quick, like I'm just looking for directions. It scared the crap out of me, because these guys are pretty bad news. And so then I called the detective, told him, and then they came out. In this case, they actually ended up arresting 6 people. They didn't know that our technology actually tracked them. The police got them to believe they all ratted on each other, which was awesome. I think they know now. Another case I had was this guy named Victor. This one was really frustrating because a laptop got stolen, and we didn't get any connections for like 2 weeks. And so I was really frustrated. We started getting pings finally, and it was in Missouri of all places, right? How the hell did the laptop get to Missouri? And I was getting these photos of this guy, and it was really, he did a really nice thing for us because he went into the computer and actually changed the username to his full name. So we were gathering that information. But I was getting photos from him doing all kinds of weird shit. There was like a photo of him in a hotel, and there's like a girl in the background. Some weird stuff was happening there. So I know I felt a little dirty, but Victor did steal a laptop. So we also found, from his name, I was able to get other information. I identified his MySpace profile. I also discovered that he was really into Scion. He's really into cars. So we mined information from various forums, which was cool because he liked to take photos of his car, so we also had his license plate number. That was great. So he was also a power seller on eBay. He was selling car parts. Kind of gives you an idea of what he does for a living. Probably mostly stolen parts. And then Victor was nice. He ended up selling that laptop along with the stolen bike to his friend. So we had a photo of him as well. And this was a case where we actually worked with the district attorney, and they said, you've actually gathered enough information. Even if he doesn't have the laptop, we're able to get him, bust him for stolen property, right? So the police were really appreciated the help we gave them. So I even had his phone number. I had all kinds of other data about him as well. So I had a lot of these kind of recoveries. I mean, there's quite a few of them, but this was one of my favorites. There was another one we had that was actually in Brazil, where someone actually did a carjacking. There was this guy who was a veterinary student, and these guys, they pulled them out of the car and just beat the crap out of them. One guy almost to death. And then they drove off, and the customer's laptop was in the back, and then of course, they sold it once they found it. We ended up getting it back for them, and then in this particular case, not only did we recover stolen property, but we also were able to get some people that were pretty mean and help solve an assault case as well. So then, after laptops, I kind of got into the mobile. Like, what can we do with mobile as well? The geolocation was easier because, they all have GPS enabled in the device. IP addresses, of course, is going to be more problematic. That's not going to get me down to an ISP or someone's house. We also then did photo and contact backups. I was very concerned about doing backups of people's information because if our system gets hacked, they have access to all of our information. And I was very paranoid about it, so when we did it, we made it so that you would enter a privacy key and your data would get encrypted on your device before it gets sent to our cloud system. So not even I would have access to your data. If the FBI came to me and said, hey, we need this person's photos and contacts, okay, here's the encrypted blob, you gotta go to them to get the encryption key. It just turns out this was a really good idea. So we see with the fappening and some other cases where, some of these backup systems get jacked, and now someone has access to all of your information. And I'm going to play a video here. This actually is I actually worked with a local news crew on the mobile security software I built. Actually started used by Sprint and some other stores to actually put in their demo units. So this was a really interesting case, and I think you guys will enjoy it.
That's helping track them down. News Channel 8's Ed Teachout spent the past 2 days with police and investigators on the trail of swiped cell phones. He's live outside the Washington Square Mall where the theft took place. Ed?
Well, the managers of the Sprint store here at the Washington Square Mall behind me say they're very confident that tracking software developed only miles away from here and put onto their demo phones will lead to an arrest.
This is a $500 phone. This ends up being a $450 phone.
2 empty display cradles are all that remains after someone stole 2 demo cell phones from the Sprint store at Washington Square Mall on Saturday. Moments after surveillance video caught the theft on tape, employees initiated tracking software installed on the stolen phones.
We were able to not only find the GPS location of the individuals that took them, but also we've been able to monitor any activity that happens in the phone.
That activity turned out to be pictures someone took shortly after the phones were stolen. Tigard police admit it's a brave new world when pictures taken on cell phones can be told to send back pictures once they're stolen.
And that has not only piqued the interest of our investigators, but in essence appears at this point could be very credible information for us to follow up on.
The Portland creator of the software tracking the theft says police are on the right track.
If they're not the thieves, they definitely know who stole it.
And if you look over the head of this man, you'll see in the window an Oregon temporary permit. Philip, this is Ed. With the help of a gadget track investigator on the phone, we tracked the stolen phone signal to this Vancouver apartment complex. There we found the exact temporary permit and a young woman who told us off camera a man she called Peter had sent this photo to her Saturday evening, but says she knew nothing about the phones.
Hi, my name is Ed.
We tracked the second cell phone signal to this duplex about 8 blocks away.
You don't have a Samsung Epic phone in this location?
No. Police were here yesterday looking for it.
We're back live now outside the Washington Square Mall where we've just obtained within the hour the DMV records on that temporary permit. Tigard police say they hope the men in the pictures will contact them soon so they can explain how their faces ended up on a stolen cell phone. Back to you.
Thank you, Ed Teachout.
Yeah, so in that particular case, we had the surveillance photos. We had also the photos that they took of themselves. So they were taking selfies and they're sending it to this girl. So that was really helpful. And we're also able to get some GPS data from the photos. And we got location. One challenge with this was that we weren't getting very accurate GPS from some of the phones. I'm not sure if it's the Samsung Galaxy issue, but we were getting very accurate location information from the photos. So that was really nice to have that as a backup. And we did, get the photo of the guy, and I noticed that there was a trip permit on the back, so that was really helpful. Again, they made it a lot easier. In this particular case, they actually found a theft ring. There were about 6 to 7 people that got arrested as a result of it, and they also recovered a stolen car. It wasn't this one, but there was another one of the other guys had a stolen vehicle. So I learned a lot too. When I was looking at images, I got really interested in this, and I started looking at some of the metadata. GPS coordinates is one thing that's helpful. Cell phone cameras are going to have that capability. They also have the timestamp, which is really good evidence. But I also started discovering that in really high-end digital cameras, the make and model and serial number are actually embedded in the cameras. And you can actually look at that with Exif tool. And I actually created a quick little website called exif.io where you can actually upload a photo, and if it actually finds a serial number, it'll show you. But I found, what if there's a way to search for this information? I knew that you could do some Google searches and maybe, you get lucky. But there really wasn't anyone that's actually mined this information and created a search engine. So kind of being the guy that I am, I found that these are all the cameras that are actually, they will actually embed the make, model, and serial number of the camera. When we look at some of the evidence for photos too, there's a lot of data that's available in there. We can identify, what device took it. And it's useful when, I was helping with a reporter. They wanted to know about, some of these nude photos from celebrities. With Scarlett Johansson, the media kept claiming that the phone was hacked. They got into the phone. No, the Exif Data actually revealed that there were multiple phones over the course of several years. Of course, I downloaded the images and mined it for research purposes. So the point of compromise was actually email, right? It wasn't actually the phone was hacked. It was Chris Cheney. He'd guessed the passwords, and he got busted, and he's now serving 10 years in jail. So looking at Exif mining, there's a lot of data that was actually available, at Flickr in particular. I was going to build this all out. So I had a theory. I wanted to mine and actually identify if I can create a database of this data. But Flickr really limits you on how many queries you can make. But at the time, I was actually advising a company called CP Usage that sort of had like a SETI at home type of thing where they had like a bunch of customers and you can actually pay them for their computer's idle time. So I had access to like thousands of computers, some of them in like universities and things like that. So basically what I did was I farmed out this Python script that would go in and we mined all of Flickr within a course of about 3 to 4 weeks. We actually mined all the Exif data from all the images. I actually talked to someone at Yahoo afterwards and like, that was you? They were trying to figure out who was doing this stuff. But yeah, we actually created a database. And I also found other sites too, like the 500 Pics, Panoromeo, TwitPic. And I found Twitter, even though they'll actually, they'll remove all the Exif data from the image when you upload them, they weren't doing that with your profile photos. So I was finding these tiny little icons, and they had all this Exif data that wasn't available in it, so I knew you could actually identify where someone was and the serial number of the camera they took and stuff. So it was really interesting research. So the idea is that we would, we mined all this data, and then I created a search engine. We had, there was just millions and millions of cameras, and then I put it out there just as a free tool that people can search their cameras for. The idea is to recover stolen cameras. And it wasn't too long, we actually had a case. There was a guy named John Heller. So he's a professional photographer. He was on assignment for Getty Images. And he was at the Egyptian Theater and turned around and $9,000 worth of camera equipment was stolen. It was gone. And he thought it was gone forever until a year later he heard about this tool and he goes, hey, I'm going to search my serial, the camera. He entered it in and he got a hit. So he did a search and we mapped it out to a Flickr account. And then that Flickr account mapped to a Facebook account of another professional photographer, and he just happened to have photos of all his camera gear, and there was his camera. He contacted the LAPD, and so what happened was, the camera was stolen. The guy stole it. He then sold it on Craigslist. The person that bought it on Craigslist sold it on eBay later on, right? And so there was this whole process. And so we went to the person that had it, and he said, hey, I didn't steal it. I bought it on eBay. They go to the eBay seller. The eBay seller, yeah, I bought it from a guy on Craigslist. This is like almost like a year and a half later. They go to the apartment where the guy bought it on Craigslist, and they go in and they find this guy, and he's got all kinds of other stolen property in his apartment. So this is an interesting case because a lot of people didn't realize this was possible. A lot of people didn't realize that just having an image or having a serial number can actually be tracked a stolen camera. So it's one of those examples, I think, where new technology, as we evolve and we find ways of getting this information, there's ways of this can lead back to us, right? So a lot of folks didn't realize that this is possible, and now a lot of camera thieves, now they're thinking twice about stealing cameras. So there was another case too where a guy on Craigslist, he was selling his camera, and some people came to his place. They said they had cash. They went out to his garage to show him the camera, and then they punched him in the face, knocked him out to the ground, and stole his camera and a bunch of other stuff. But we were able to get information from this. We got the name. We did some additional investigation on the person that had the camera. He wasn't a very good dude. He actually kept changing his cameras like every few months, and he advertised himself as a professional photographer for models. Interesting dude. But doing more research, I was able to get his address from his domain registration. He was a professional photographer and a DJ. Got his cell phone number, social media photo sharing accounts. We started mining a lot of other information from him, and he also likes to take photos of him and his friends doing weed, which was, I don't know, in Oregon it's cool, but not where he was from. And he also had an unlicensed firearm. He likes to show how hardcore he is, take photos of that. Also, he likes to take photos of him and his girlfriend driving down the freeway, smoking weed. But he also took a photo of his speedometer going about over 100 miles an hour, which isn't smart because you have geolocation and a timestamp, so the guy's kind of a dumbass. Police loved this. It was great. There was all kinds of things we got him for. It was good. What's interesting is this, I had some other recoveries and people were using it, but I actually got reached out to by ICE. They wanted to use this information too. A lot of times, some child porn images, they'll have Exif data that are embedded in them. So I gave them free access to via API to the data. And the idea here is that if someone takes a photo, like maybe with their family, right, that camera may have been used in some of these cases, or you may even find that Joe Perv, he's using it for for child porn, but then he also uses the same camera when he takes his family to Disneyland, right? So we can get these connections as well. I'm not sure if it was actually caught anybody, they couldn't say, but I thought it was a really interesting use case for it. And, so there are other data too. I'm not sure you guys, when I talk about a lot of the data that, that can come out like Boogie Data, Madison's a good example. I was actually involved in an investigation. There was an executive. He was already kind of suspect in some of the things he was doing. Actually found, he was using a company email address for his Ashley Madison account. He was actually also using the corporate card, the corporate debit card, for those purchases, for the subscription. And he also used the company billing address. So if you're going to be doing those kind of websites, don't use your corporate card. Just saying. But the reason he was doing it, he was kind of covering up because he didn't want his wife to find out what he was doing, so he used the corporate card. And this led to a deeper investigation. He was doing all kinds of things, like with hotels and other things, basically cheating on his wife and using the corporate card to do it. So. And then, another thing is that a lot of times people use phone numbers and other information. So when you're doing like OSINT, it's really helpful to mine that data because a lot of times that's going to be people's passwords. One example, I'm going to play this. I got asked to help hack a $6 million smart home that they said was unhackable. We did this on Prime Time TV, which was a lot of fun, sort of like a reality type show. So I'm going to play this, but the important thing here is that the guy used his cell phone number as his password. Right, so that's how we were able to get in. So this isn't like some Mr. Robot stuff. You'll even see through this whole thing, the passwords were really basic and simple. So I'll play this. I'm going to shut up. Hold on.
One of our big goals here at Crime Watch Daily is to protect you. And today we have a frightening investigation. If you have Wi-Fi, did you know hackers can literally take over your entire home and just about everything inside? Anna Garcia is about to show you just how easily it can be done.
We built our dream house here in Southern California and absolutely love it. We're just a few steps away from the beach.
Vicki Johnson's new beachfront house is not only spectacular, it's smart. She can control most everything from her phone or tablet.
It's pretty smart. The drapes go up and down automatically. We can close doors. We can flush toilets. We can turn lights on and off. We can turn the air conditioning on and off. TVs, music. It's a brilliant house.
A secure fortress, she thinks.
We were told it was hack-proof.
We'll see about that. Vicky, who's a Crime Watch Daily producer, has agreed to let us launch a cyber attack on her house. She's throwing a party for some unsuspecting guests.
They think they're coming to take a tour of a smart house.
But what we're really doing is hacking her house during the party and potentially the devices of every guest who walks through the front door. Helping me are two cybersecurity experts from Tripwire, a company that secures the computer systems for nearly half the Fortune 500 companies. We've hidden cameras inside the house, mounted more cameras in the SUV, where I'll be working with the hackers, Craig Young and Ken Westin.
So first we need to break into the Wi-Fi.
In the world of cyber criminals, a home's Wi-Fi is the new front door. This antenna is step one to picking the virtual lock.
This antenna gives us a survey of what wireless networks are here.
Vicky has 28 devices connected to the home's wireless internet. Once they were into the Wi-Fi system, our hackers were quickly able to commandeer the home's cameras.
These are the security cameras to the house that you've hacked into.
Exactly. Here we actually can see this is actually our car out here. This is the front door.
Ken is able to take control of the security cameras because they have a separate password, and it is ridiculously easy.
If you don't secure them properly, then they become insecurity cameras.
Once our hackers are in, every security barrier falls like a line of dominoes. This party's over. And the cyber attack is about to begin. First, we turn off the lights. Then, with control of the security cameras, we divert the video signal and play it on the TV in the living room. With everyone's attention on the TV, the hackers talk to the guests.
We have taken control of this house, the lights, the security cameras.
Now a special message from me in the car is piped in. I'm Anna Garcia from Crime Watch Daily, and this house has just been hacked. We hacked your home!
Yeah, so
it's been a lot of
little dramatic, but it was a lot of fun, actually. You could do that for free. But that's the thing is, like, we were getting the Wi-Fi. We actually used a cloud cracking service, because we're lazy. It cost us $200 to get the password crack, and we got it back, and I go, that looks like a cell phone number. And then we do a search for it, and it's the guy's website. Like, it's his cell phone number, and he has it on his website. So if we actually did a little more homework and we weren't lazy, we could have found that without having to pay $200. But it was interesting when you get in there, like, once people crack the Wi-Fi network, you're able to do quite a bit. A lot of times they use default passwords and things like that. But it's another example where if you have just a little bit of information about someone, just a little piece of data can actually lead to pretty catastrophic results. So, and that's pretty much it for my presentation. Do you guys have any questions? Anybody? You can reach me I'm on the Twitters at kwestin. You can email me at kwestin@gmail.com. But great. Well, thanks again for having me. I appreciate it.